Story 1. So I'm 28 years old and married to my wife Haley, who's also 28. We've been married for a few years now, and a couple of months back, we welcomed our first baby boy into the world. We decided to share some pictures of him on Facebook a few weeks ago, but looking back, that might not have been the best idea. My relatives ended up seeing those photos and sent them to my dad. My dad and I haven't talked in almost 10 years, ever since he decided not to help me with my college tuition while he completely covered my cousin's tuition without him even asking for it. I always knew my dad liked to support his brother, but paying for my cousin's college felt like he was taking things way too far. Just to give you a bit more background, my cousin Peter and I were born pretty close together, just a few months apart. Growing up, Peter and I had this kind of rivalry, almost like we were siblings, even though we weren't. We were both always trying to get my dad's attention. My mom left my dad when I was just a baby because she felt she wasn't ready to be a mom, so it was just me and my dad after that. Meanwhile, Peter had both his parents, but they were always super busy with their work and didn't give him much attention. That's probably why he was always looking to my dad for that. My dad was a big shot in sales at his company, and my uncle and aunt were always tied up running their own cafe. Alright, so here's the deal. My dad's brother and his wife ran a cafe, but it wasn't doing too hot, so they often needed help from my dad. My dad had a pretty good job and was able to lend them a hand. I never really thought much of it or got upset because it didn't cross my mind that one day my dad might pick them over me, his own kid. Back in high school, my cousin Peter and I were kind of neck and neck grade-wise, but he struggled a bit more, especially with math. By the end of the year, I kind of pulled ahead, which felt like a big win for me. That is, until everything went sideways. My dad dropped the bomb that he wouldn't be paying for my college, suggesting I should get a scholarship, but he was all in for covering Peter's tuition because Peter's folks were having money troubles. I couldn't believe it and argued with my dad tons about this decision, but he wouldn't budge. He even said I should be more understanding and think of Peter like a brother. When I pointed out that Peter and I weren't actually brothers since we're not related by blood, my dad got super mad. He said if I was going to talk like that, I might as well move out. I was already super upset with him for not helping me with college and feeling like he chose Peter over me. So without really planning it out, I just left and crashed with some friends for a while. So after that whole thing went down, I never really got to hang out or chat with my dad again. He did try to hit me up a few times, wanting me to move back home and all, but he never once mentioned helping me out with college funds. I gave it my best shot to snag a student loan or something along those lines, but it was like hitting a brick wall because I was on my own with no grown-ups in my corner to back me up. That led to me having to bail on college just a couple of days in because my pockets were pretty much empty. Finding a job was next on my list, but man, it felt like every job out there either paid peanuts or expected you to have no life outside of work, which meant bye-bye class time. It was a super messed up spot to be in, but I didn't just sit around feeling sorry for myself. I managed to land this temporary gig at a company, even though it wasn't paying much. I had to grind like crazy there because I had bills piling up. Rent, groceries, you name it. Doing all this solo was no walk in the park. I was pretty stressed knowing that if I didn't keep up with my share of the bills, my roommates weren't going to be too thrilled. So I had to hustle hard without any shortcuts or handouts. But as luck would have it, things started to turn around for me. All that hard work began to pay off, and I eventually landed a much better position within the same company. That job turned out to be more than just a paycheck. It's where I met my amazing wife, and now we've got this awesome little kid together. So when I look back, I can't say it was all rough times. Things kind of fell into place in a way I never expected. Even though I missed out on the whole college experience and the life I thought was waiting for me, I ended up pushing through way harder than most folks my age had to. But hey, it's all been worth it in the end, right? Now I'm actually okay with how things turned out because I believe all the hard work I put in has shaped me into who I am today. And honestly, I don't have any regrets. I've heard that Peter too has his own job at some company and has a family, but apparently he doesn't make as much money as I do. That must be kind of embarrassing for him. I guess some of my buddies have seen where Peter lives and how he spends his days, and they say it's nowhere near as cool as my setup, even though he's the one who went to college. I felt a bit of a boost in my pride when I heard that Peter wasn't doing as well as me. I was so close to calling up my dad to see what he thought about that, but I ended up not doing it because I didn't want to stoop to that level. Basically, it felt like I came out on top and Peter didn't, even though it seemed like everything was in his favor from the start. That was a win in my book. I didn't feel the need to rub it in their faces or anything, but over time, my dad kept trying to patch things up with me. He remembered my birthday, Christmas, and New Year's every single year without fail. I never responded to him, but I also didn't cut him off completely. Deep down, I was waiting for him to just say sorry, even once. The craziest part, and the thing that bugged me the most, was that he tried to reconnect with me but never once said he was sorry for what he did. It's like he didn't even see anything wrong with his actions and thought he was totally right to choose Peter over me, even though I'm his own kid, his son. And that's the main reason I never got back to him. Even when he told me how sad he was for not being part of my wedding. He texted saying he wished me and Haley nothing but happiness forever, which kinda made me feel a bit guilty for a second. But then I remembered he still hadn't said sorry for everything, and that stopped me from feeling bad for him. It was clear he didn't feel bad enough to say sorry to me. He kept sending texts even after the wedding thing, but I still didn't reply. He never called, which I thought was odd because he could have if he really wanted to, but maybe that was too much for him. Then everything changed a few weeks back when my son was born, and we shared the news on Facebook. That's when I got a call from my dad, the first one in almost 10 years. I answered, not really sure what to expect. Part of me was hoping this would be the moment he finally said sorry, maybe because he wanted to meet his grandson, but guess what? I was let down again. He didn't say sorry or even talk about all the stuff that went down between us. Instead, he just talked about how upset he was that I got married and had a kid, and he was missing out on all of it. He said his heart was breaking, and he really hoped I could just let bygones be bygones and not make such a big deal out of everything that had happened over the last decade. I really couldn't wrap my head around how he thought I was blowing things out of proportion. I mean, come on, he literally chose to pay for my cousin's college instead of mine. Because of that decision, I had no choice but to quit college and start from scratch, working my way up from the very bottom. If I hadn't had to leave school, I would have been way ahead in life, but nope. I didn't get that chance, all thanks to him. And it's not like I was slacking off in school or anything. I was doing pretty okay. I wasn't the top of my class, but definitely not at the bottom either. I wasn't good enough to get a scholarship, but certainly not so bad that he should just toss me aside for Peter. When I heard from him after all this time, I lost it. I told him straight up how much I regretted even picking up the phone, wishing I just blocked him ages ago because all this while I was stupidly waiting for an apology. But that apology, yeah, it was never gonna happen. I finally got that for someone to say sorry, they actually have to feel sorry first. And it was clear as day he didn't feel a shred of regret. He even tried to argue with me about it, calling me unfair. Can you believe that, coming from him, who doesn't even seem to grasp the basic idea of fairness? In a moment of total anger, I blurted out that maybe I was actually his second son and that Peter must be his first, considering how differently he treated us. And oh boy, did I push the boundaries there. I hinted that maybe there was something sketchy going on behind the scenes, like an affair between him and my aunt, which could explain why Peter was born. That might have been pushing the accusation a bit too far, but it just slipped out in the heat of the moment, fueled by all the unfairness I felt from his favoritism. After I told my dad to go chat with his other son and not to waste my time anymore, I just hung up on him. Looking back, I think I might have messed up because the next thing I knew, it wasn't my dad reaching out, but my aunt. She sent me a text saying what I had said was way out of line. She was upset because she felt I dragged her into this mess on purpose just to get back at my dad. She mentioned that my words had hurt not just one but 3 people, and they all thought I owed them an apology for crossing a line. I haven't texted back yet, mostly because I'm not sure what to even say, to be honest. I don't get why my dad had to go and spill the beans about our private chat to everyone. It was just between me and him, and I didn't want anyone else to get mixed up in this. I said those things in the heat of the moment, aiming them at him, not intending to hurt anyone else. I really don't care much about how my dad or uncle feel about this, but I do feel bad about upsetting my aunt. She's always been fair to both Peter and me, never picking sides or comparing us. Even though Peter is her kid, she could have easily played favorites like the rest, but she didn't. She's genuinely nice, and I feel terrible for making her feel bad, dragging her and Peter into this mess, especially with that comment about Peter being my dad's son. That was out of line. I talked it over with my wife, and she didn't take sides, but did mention that what I said was pretty harsh, especially since my aunt was always kind to me. I'm thinking I should probably say sorry, but part of me still feels like this whole mess is more on my dad for blabbing, not on me. So does that make me the bad guy for saying what I did about my cousin being my dad's other son? Date 1. So after about a week of just staring at my aunt's text and not knowing what to say, I finally hit her back with a message, and yep, I said I was sorry for what I blurted out. I tried to explain that my dad's actions really got to me, and in the heat of the moment, I just said something without thinking. I didn't mean to drag her or my uncle into this mess. I told her straight up that I was mad, but I never wanted to make her feel bad. Also, I was kind of surprised that my dad decided to spill the beans about our private chat. I was low-key hoping my dad would catch the hint that I was also a bit upset with him for stirring things up, even if I didn't spell it out for him. I figured my aunt would pass my message along to my uncle and dad. If my dad was paying attention, he'd get that this was my way of saying sorry to her, but not so much to him. Haley thought it was a smart move, apologizing to my aunt but not really to my dad. And honestly, my dad hasn't earned an apology, not with all the stuff he's done. He can try to play it down all he wants, but it doesn't change a thing. Choosing Peter over me, making me quit college, and not once feeling bad about it. Yeah, that doesn't sit right with me, so no apologies for him. As for my uncle, we never really clicked, even back when I was living with my dad. We weren't close. My aunt was the only one who treated me decently. My uncle, he was all about comparing me and Peter, and like my dad, wasn't there when it mattered. So let them feel whatever they want. I've said sorry to the one person who deserved it from me, and that's where I draw the line. If she's cool with my apology, great. If not, I'm still okay because I've done my part. It's up to her now to take it or leave it. Update 2. So after what felt like forever, or 3 whole days, my aunt finally decides to text me back. By then, I was pretty much thinking she decided to ghost me or something. But nah. She gets back to me saying she's all right with my apology, which was a relief. But then she throws in this curveball. Apparently, her husband and my dad are still waiting on the edge of their seats for their own apologies because they felt I had dissed them too. Let me be super clear about this. There's no way I'm dishing out apologies like free candy, especially not to them. It's like they've never really been there for me or cared about what I felt. So why should I bother about their feelings now? The only reason I even thought about apologizing to my aunt was because she wasn't like them. She was actually nice to me back when I was a kid. The rest of them, they might as well have been on a different planet for all the warmth they showed me. Plus, my dad always preached about not saying sorry unless you really truly mean it. So guess what? I'm taking his advice to heart. No fake apologies for me because I'm just not feeling it. My aunt seemed a bit peeved at that and tried to lecture me about not caring about other people's feelings. Like I'm supposed to just suck it up and play nice. But here's the deal. I couldn't care less if they're upset with me. I spelled it out for her one more time. I'm not about to lose any sleep over this. Right now, my world revolves around my wife and my son, and that's about it. Everyone else, they can go have a pity party without me. I noticed my aunt was ready to keep the text war going, and honestly, I wasn't here for it, so I hit that block button. Haley's hoping we can put this drama to bed, and man, I'm right there with her. But something tells me they're not gonna let this go quietly. They seem way too keen on turning this into a whole saga. Update 3. Alright, so here's the scoop. I totally called it, and I can't decide if I'm more like yay, go me, or just plain annoyed. Peter took it upon himself to throw a bit of a tantrum online, splashing our dirty laundry all over his Facebook. He went all dramatic, claiming I was throwing shade at his folks just because I was jelly of him being the favorite child in my dad's eyes. Honestly, why he thought this was some earth-shattering news to everyone is beyond me. It's not like I've been playing my feelings close to the chest. I've been pretty much an open book about how unfair the whole favoritism thing felt, and let's be real, our so-called rivalry wasn't exactly breaking news to our circle of friends. So Peter trying to make a scene on Facebook was, in my eyes, a whole lot of nothing. He even had the audacity to demand an apology from me, not just to his mom but also to his dad and mine. I mean, talk about making a mountain out of a molehill, right? I almost let my fingers do the talking and crafted a juicy reply to spill the tea for everyone. But then I took a breath, hit the backspace, and let it all go. I decided not to add fuel to their drama fire because deep down I knew this was exactly what they were hoping for. They wanted me to dive into the mess, throw some words around, and then watch as they twisted it to make me the bad guy in the saga, even though it was my dad who lit the fuse in the first place. So by choosing to zip it, I effectively put a lid on their drama pot. Haley, being the voice of reason as always, thought I was making the smart move. Jumping into that hot mess wasn't going to do me any favors. I've already extended my olive branch where it mattered, and I've done my part. If they're keen on keeping up their woe is us performance, they can have at it. I'm stepping out of the ring. That's why I hit the block button on Peter. Since our friend circles don't really overlap, it's not like his rants are going to change what the people who truly know me think. They've got the full story, and at the end of the day, that's the bit that counts the most to me. I mean, who needs that kind of drama, right? Better to keep it cool and move on with those who get the real picture. Date for. Looks like my plan to just ignore Peter's drama-filled post paid off. He actually took it down. Seems like him seeing my buddies who know the real scoop threatening to spill my side of the story in the comments got under his skin. They basically told him to nix the post or face the music with some truth bombs that wouldn't make him or our family look too shiny. Peter must have felt the pressure because he wanted to keep up this perfect image that he, my dad, and my aunt have been trying to show off all at my expense. So yep, he ditched the post, but get this, he then slid into all my friends' DMs trying to warn them they were backing the wrong horse, saying they'd be on the wrong side of history. I mean, come on, as if our little family spat is going to be remembered for ages. That's just him being way too extra. I can't help but feel a bit secondhand embarrassment for him, and honestly, it's kind of cringy that I'm even related to them. They're all acting a level of crazy that's off the charts. But hey, I'm just relieved he stopped spreading our family drama for the whole world to see. If he kept that post up without me biting back, it would have been super awkward. I'm really just crossing my fingers and hoping this is the end of it. I've got zero interest in reopening communication with them or finding out about the next ridiculous thing they decide to do. Like I've been saying, all I want is to chill with my wife and son. I'm so not here for any more of their drama. Date 5. Alright, so it's been nearly a month since I last filled you guys in on what's been happening. First off, I just got to say a huge thank you for all the support and kind words you've all sent my way. Haley and I seriously appreciate it. It's kind of amazing to know there are folks out there, people we've never even met, who are cheering us on. It really means a lot, and I'm super glad I decided to share what was going on with me here when I was all tangled up and trying to figure things out. So what's new, you ask? Well, out of the blue, I got an email from my uncle a few days back, and let me tell you, it was a total curveball. I was pretty taken aback that he decided to reach out, especially since things were pretty frosty between us last time we talked. I was this close to just ignoring the email, but Haley was like, maybe you should check it out. If they're getting in touch after all this time, it could be something big. She had a point, so I went ahead and opened it, and honestly, I'm still trying to wrap my head around what I found in that email. So here's the bombshell. Peter actually is my dad's biological son. Yeah, my aunt and my dad, they really did have that affair I suspected, which just blows my mind. I'm kind of gutted that my wild guess turned out to be on the money because it means Peter and I are actually related by blood, which is just... I always held on to the thought that at the very least, Peter and I weren't related, but nope, turns out we're half-siblings, and that's something I can't ever shake off now. How did my uncle stumble upon this little family secret? Well, it looks like my dad had swung by their place a while back, aiming to have a chat with my aunt about the whole mess I'd kicked up, all while my uncle was out grabbing a coffee. So my uncle walked in right as my dad was in the middle of talking about what I had said, that Peter might be his son. My uncle hadn't planned on overhearing this, but once he did, my dad had no choice but to explain the whole thing again. And my dad was acting super weird while telling the story, which made my uncle start wondering what was up. Then both my dad and my aunt started making a huge deal out of what I said, acting way more offended than they should have been. My uncle knew I was just speaking out of frustration and didn't really mean to accuse anyone seriously, but the way they were reacting, like they were personally attacked, made him start thinking there was more to the story. Their over-the-top reaction was what tipped my uncle off. He figured they were acting way too defensive, which was odd, and then when they insisted he'd make that Facebook post about it, even after I'd said sorry, it just didn't sit right with him. He felt something was off but knew better than to try talking it out with my dad, who wouldn't want to hear it, and he was too wary to bring it up with his wife in case he was barking up the wrong tree. So my uncle decided to take a step that hadn't crossed anyone else's mind. He reached out to my mom to see if she could shed any light on the whole situation. Finding her wasn't easy, but after some effort, he managed to connect with her a few weeks back. And boy, did she have news for him. She confirmed the whole mess. Turns out she never really felt cut out for motherhood in the first place. Learning about my dad's affair just gave her the perfect out she was looking for. This also explained how she managed to dodge paying child support and walked away with a pretty decent chunk of change in the settlement. But yeah, she decided to spill the beans to my uncle because after all these years, it seemed like the right time to come clean. My uncle filled me in on all of this through a pretty snarky email where he sort of thanked me for being a pain because that's what led him to uncover his wife's affair. Now they're headed for a divorce. My dad's not talking to either of them anymore, and Peter decided to cut ties with the whole lot of us. And then, in a kind of bitter way, my uncle said he hopes I'm happy now. And you know what? I actually am. For the first time in a long while, I feel like a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Before we start, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. My family invited my wife and I to mend things, but it was really a setup to pressure me to divorce her for someone they prefer. So I walked out. I am a 35-year-old man who grew up in a small, tight-knit town where everyone knew everyone else's business. It was the kind of place where people still waved to their neighbors from their front porches, and Sunday potlucks were the highlight of the week. It was a dying town, and I knew that I had to get away from it. I was always interested in photography, but my parents expected me to grow up and help my dad and my brother out on our farm. Now, don't get me wrong. I absolutely love our farm, and I grew up with the horses, but I always felt like something was missing in my life. Although I was happy with what we had, I was not fully satisfied. My older brother, Alan, is 3 years older than me, and he was the only one who actually listened to what I had to say. I remember when he went to college, he saved up money from his part-time job to get me my first camera. I was overwhelmed with joy. I took that camera everywhere with me and took pictures of everything I saw. It is still one of my prized possessions. I was a scholar student at school and was part of our football team, so getting into college was easy for me with my scholarship. I continued to play in college, and this is how I met Elena. She was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. Her blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, and a smile that could light up the darkest room immediately caught my attention. She was part of the cheerleading squad, so she was there for every game I played. I was a shy person, and so was she, so it took a long time for us to start talking with each other. But when we did, it turned out she shared a similar passion for photography. That common interest became the foundation of our friendship and eventually our love story. Now, when I asked Elena out on an official date for the very first time, she was a bit hesitant, but she said yes. I was over the moon and had never been more excited about anything in my life. I meticulously planned our first date, wanting it to be perfect for this extraordinary woman who had captured my heart. I took Elena to a charming little Italian restaurant nestled in the heart of the city. Soft candlelight illuminated the cozy space, creating a warm and intimate atmosphere as we sat across from each other. A mixture of nervousness and anticipation filled the air. I couldn't help but be enchanted by her presence, her smile, and the way her eyes sparkled in the flickering candlelight. We shared stories, laughter, and our favorite Italian dishes. The initial hesitation that Elena had felt seemed to evaporate with every passing moment. I learned about her childhood, her dreams, and the journey that had brought her to the same city where our paths had crossed. It was a night of connection and discovery, and I couldn't have asked for anything more. After dinner, we decided to take a leisurely stroll through a nearby park. While strolling, Elena finally opened up to me about the secret that she had kept from everyone in college. You see, Elena was a single mother. She had a kid named Harry who was just 2 years old. I was surprised to hear that Elena had gotten pregnant when she was 16 because of her then boyfriend, Nick. They were together, and she thought that he would be happy with the news. But unfortunately, Nick didn't, and he decided to not be in the picture. She loved the baby, so she didn't want to give it up regardless of the circumstances, and thankfully her parents supported her decision. Nick's parents agreed to send Elena the monthly child support without fail, and she decided to never contact Nick again. Elena told me all of this with tears in her eyes. She continued saying that this is why she never went out on dates in the last 2 years and had always kept to herself, which was true. She had decided to open up to me so that I could make a decision on whether or not to pursue her further. After our first date, after knowing everything about her, I could see the vulnerability in her eyes, the weight of a story she had carried alone for so long. At that moment, as Elena hesitated, awaiting my reaction, I felt a surge of admiration for the woman before me. Without hesitation, I took her hand, expressing my genuine appreciation for her honesty. I assured her that her past didn't change how I felt about her, and that her strength only deepened my admiration. With those words, I could see a mixture of relief and gratitude wash over Elena's face. She hadn't expected such an understanding response, and the weight she carried seemed to lift, if only a little. That first date became a cherished memory, the beginning of our love story for the years to come. I truly didn't care if she had a child because I knew that if Elena is this solid and honest of a person, then it means her child is going to be just as wonderful as her. We kept going out on dates, and eventually, after 6 months, she introduced me to her parents. They welcomed me with open arms, displaying the warmth and kindness that Elena herself radiated. It didn't take long for me to feel like a part of their family. We shared stories over homemade dinners, and I could see where Elena got her resilience and genuine kindness. This was also the first time I met Harry, her precious 2-year-old. When Harry toddled into the room, his eyes curious and innocent, my heart melted. Elena introduced us, and from that moment, I knew my life was about to change. I won't lie, but I had always dreamt of becoming a father. When Harry held my hand in his little fingers and looked up at me, I fell in love with him the same way I had fallen in love with his mother. I couldn't imagine how anybody could have abandoned him, but I knew that if I was going to be in his life, I needed to step up. Elena never asked me to help Harry out because she had a helping hand at home, but regardless of that, I liked spending time with her child. He had the most adorable smile, and spending time with him made me forget all the negative things in my life. Elena and I had a wonderful relationship, and she always encouraged me to follow my passions. I decided to join a photography club in college, which opened new possibilities for me. It was difficult to keep up with the club when I already had classes to attend and my football practice every day. But joining the club was a good decision in the long run, as it helped me meet like-minded people who I'm still in touch with today. Once, when my parents visited me in college, I seized the opportunity to introduce them to Elena, hopeful that they would see the wonderful person she was. Initially, they seemed to appreciate her company, but it was during a private conversation that I told them about Harry, and their reaction wasn't great at first. My parents looked utterly shocked by this revelation. My mom asked if I was dating a single mom in college, and I said yes. My dad couldn't believe it either and asked if I was being serious right now. I told them firmly that I loved Elena just as much as I loved Harry, and it didn't matter to me if she was a single mother, as she was so much more than that. I wanted to take care of them for the rest of my life. My parents, understandably, tried to talk me out of it, questioning my choice. But despite their attempts to discourage me, I stood my ground. They eventually gave up, perhaps hoping that this was just a phase, as my mother called it. After I graduated college, I decided to take a chance and join a photography internship. My parents were absolutely against it, and my dad even told me that this sounded too girly for me to pursue. I laughed and tried to explain how taking photographs is what I had always loved doing. They tried to discourage me, but when I finally secured the internship, there was little that they could do by standing in my way. Elena, on the other hand, supported me completely. She believed in me and encouraged me to take this leap of faith. Even my older brother was happy for me. He was by now married and had shifted back to the farm. He had always liked being next to my dad, and it was clear he enjoyed taking care of the land and animals. My parents, especially Dad, held immense pride in my brother. He was the son who followed in his footsteps, taking on the responsibilities of the farm with dedication. They admired his commitment and felt a sense of accomplishment in having a son who listened and understood the family legacy. While my parents never resented me, there lingered a hint of disappointment whenever I used to talk to them about my passion for photography. I didn't quite turn out like my brother, and that contrast, though unspoken, was palpable. Yet, they never held it against me. Instead, they hoped I would find my way and carve my own path. During the photography internship, I found myself immersed in a whirlwind of learning and creativity. The workload was demanding, and late nights were spent perfecting shots and mastering the art of storytelling through my lens. It was a challenging yet fulfilling period that tested my dedication to photography. As the internship drew to a close, to my surprise and delight, the company offered me a full-time position as their photographer. With this new chapter in my life, I found myself exploring corners of the world I had only dreamed of. The opportunity to travel and capture the beauty around me was nothing short of incredible. Each new city, culture, and landscape became a canvas for my camera, and I soaked in the wonder of it all. For the first time, I felt a profound sense of happiness and fulfillment that resonated through every aspect of my being. However, this newfound joy came with its own set of challenges. My busy work schedule meant that Elena and I were almost in a long-distance relationship for 3 years. Despite the physical distance, we made it work. I visited her and Harry whenever I could. She had secured a job as an accountant and was earning quite well, too. The separation was tough, but our connection remained steadfast. And this is why I have always loved Elena. She never resented me or doubted me, even though I was miles away from her. When I finally secured a high-paying job that allowed me to settle down in one place, I decided that it was time for me to propose to Elena to be my wife. I asked her parents for permission first, as I didn't want to be disrespectful, and I had known them for a long time now. They were overjoyed with the news and couldn't wait for me to be a part of their family. When I decided to inform my parents about this, they had a completely opposite reaction. My mother was beside herself in shock and started to go on a rant about how immature I was for marrying a single mother like Elena. My dad straight away told me to my face that this was going to be the worst mistake of my life and that I needed to find a woman who should have a child of my own instead of taking care of someone else's child. My parents told me how I was going to be stuck with her forever and that Elena had somehow trapped me to take care of her son because his own father didn't. Their reactions really hurt me, and I was extremely sad that this is how they thought of my future wife. I firmly stood my ground and explained that over the past 3 years, I had traveled worldwide, working tirelessly to establish myself as a photographer. Throughout this journey, Elena stood by me. She was a strong, independent woman who had a great job, and she had not rushed me into proposing to her. She had also never once asked me to take care of Harry. It was my choice to bond with her child, and now I can't imagine a life without them. My parents didn't like my answer and tried to involve my older brother and his wife in this. Surprisingly, my older brother, Alan, didn't fully support my parents, but he didn't take sides either. He did point out that this was a big burden and responsibility. His wife, however, joined my parents in trying to convince me that there were better options than Elena. She even suggested setting me up with some of her friends. Frustration built up, and I left in anger, as they all seemed to gang up on me. It was a tough moment, feeling outnumbered and misunderstood by those I expected to support me. Regardless of their decision, I proposed to Elena, and with joy in her eyes, she said yes. The memory is etched into my brain, and it is still the happiest day of my life. From the very beginning, I told Elena about my family's disapproval. She felt sad about it, but being the kind-hearted person she is, she also understood their perspective. She even went on to tell me that it wasn't too late for me to walk away, given the strain my family's opposition might put on our relationship. I reassured her that my decision was final, and this was it, that I would never leave her and Harry until my last breath. Throughout all this, my family continued to call, trying to change my mind. Despite my repeated attempts to make them understand and respect my decision, they felt that Elena was wrong for me. It was a tough time for me, and in one heated moment, my mother even declared that they wouldn't attend our wedding if I went along with this decision. I calmly replied that it was entirely her decision, and that I would understand if they were not present for my happy day. Elena and I eventually chose to get married at the courthouse, knowing my family wouldn't be there, so there was no point in having a big ceremony. Her parents stood by us, offering their support and love. Because we had not wasted away our savings on having a big wedding, we could afford to buy a house together. It took a bit of struggle, but we were able to achieve our dreams. Waking up with my wife by my side has been the most wonderful feeling in the world. Harry, now 5 years old, adds so much joy to our lives. He's a bundle of energy, always curious and full of laughter. Being a part of his growth and seeing the family we've built together fills my heart with happiness. Even though our journey had its share of challenges, the love we share as a family makes every struggle worth it. After marrying Elena, I chose to distance myself from my parents to avoid their negativity. My happiness now revolved around Elena, Harry, and her parents. Work was going smoothly, and everything fell into place just as I had envisioned. However, last week my brother, who hadn't reached out to me in a while, called. Seeing his name on my phone surprised me, and part of me hesitated to answer. But I thought it could be an emergency, so I took the call. He started saying how much he missed me and apologized for not calling me sooner. I was a bit taken aback, as my brother seldom expressed his emotions, and asked him if everything was okay. My brother then told me how my parents wanted to invite me and Elena to the farm in an attempt to mend things with us. I was surprised to hear that, as I never thought this day would come. My brother asked if it was okay for my mother to speak with me and passed the call to her. My mother's voice on the other end carried a mix of uncertainty and a hint of desperation. She spoke about wanting to mend our strained relationship and expressed how everyone in the family wanted to see me and Elena at the family farm. As she continued talking, I couldn't help but feel a sense of skepticism. I questioned whether this was a genuine attempt to reconcile with us or just another episode in the ongoing family drama. My mother, in turn, insisted that they were genuinely apologetic and were seeking a chance to rebuild our connections. Caught in a whirlwind of emotions, I hesitated. The wounds from the past were still fresh, and the idea of revisiting my family was daunting. Yet, a part of me longed for resolution, for a chance to heal the fractures that had formed over the past months. With a deep breath, I thanked my mother for reaching out and promised her that me and Elena would be there this weekend. We left Harry under the care of Elena's parents so we could fly down to my hometown. Arriving at the farm, I was warmly greeted by my parents, who also welcomed Elena with open arms. My brother and his wife came up to hug us. It felt wonderful to see my family after so long, but as I turned my head to the living room, confusion washed over us as we were met with a gathering of familiar faces and close family friends. I looked at my parents confused, and they informed me that they had decided to invite a few of their friends and family to give me a proper welcome back home. I nodded and walked in to greet everyone. My mother, wearing a sly smile, pulled me aside and introduced me to a woman named Gigi. I was taken aback, not understanding why she was introducing me to someone at what was supposed to be a family gathering. My mother then went on to say how Gigi was her high school best friend's daughter, and she had recently gone through a divorce. I nodded awkwardly, not knowing how to react. My mother then continued saying how she thought Gigi and I would make a great couple, and my confusion turned into disbelief. She started talking about how we would look so good with each other and should probably exchange numbers. As I looked at my mother incredulously, it suddenly dawned on me that this gathering wasn't just about mending things. My parents had an agenda, and it involved Gigi becoming a part of my life. I asked my mother why she was talking like this when she knew that I was married. My dad, who had perhaps overheard the conversation, told me that he needed to speak to me privately. Reluctantly, I agreed and followed them to a room, leaving Elena alone to navigate the awkward glances of curious guests. Behind closed doors, my parents wasted no time in revealing their true intentions. "Mark, we've arranged this meeting because we believe it's time for you to reconsider your marriage to Elena," my father declared with an air of authority. Stunned, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They explained their reasoning, insisting that Gigi, with her familiar background, would be a better match for me, someone they could approve of and who didn't have a child already with another man. "But I love Elena. We're married and we're building a life together. What made you even think that it would be a good idea to introduce me to Gigi?" I protested, struggling to make sense of the surreal situation. My mother, unmoved, insisted they were only looking out for my happiness, and that I would thank them one day for helping me escape my current situation. My dad told me that Gigi was divorced, so she didn't mind getting married to me if I could quickly get a divorce from Elena. I stared at my parents for a second, and then I started laughing at the sheer fact of how ridiculous this all sounded. This seemed like something out of a soap opera, but I couldn't believe that this was actually happening to me in real life. My parents had invited me with the pretense of mending things so that they could convince me to divorce the love of my life and marry someone else, only because they hated my choice. They seriously believed that I would somehow be convinced. My dad, probably feeling defensive, tried justifying their actions by saying they had discussed it with my brother and his wife as well. According to him, everyone thought I made a huge mistake marrying Elena. That statement pushed me over the edge. Despite usually keeping my cool, I couldn't contain my anger. I've always respected my parents deeply, but this was too much. I raised my voice, expressing how embarrassing and hurtful their attempts to make me leave my wife and child were. I made it clear that I was done holding on to hope that they would change. It was a breaking point, honestly. As I walked into the backyard, I found Elena talking to some of my relatives in a hushed tone. I whispered to her that we needed to leave immediately. She looked shocked, but my expression made her trust me without questioning anything further. My brother and his wife insisted that we stay, but I didn't even acknowledge them. I was so angry at my brother that he knew about this plan all along and allowed it to happen. I didn't want to create a scene, so I quietly rescheduled our flight tickets, and we left. During the flight, I filled Elena in on the conversation with my parents. She was just as shocked and a bit pissed at how they tried to pressure me into divorcing her. Since that weekend, I've been bombarded with calls and messages from my parents and my brother. He thinks I should not have shouted at my parents and that I should be a better son, saying they know me best and I should at least listen to them. So I'm sorry for fighting with my parents for trying to convince me to leave my wife and our child just because they don't approve of our marriage. Update 1. Thank you everyone for all your support for us at this tough time. I guess everyone pretty much agrees that what my parents did was completely out of line. The only reason I was feeling guilty about my decision to yell at them and leave the party was because, being the youngest, I have never really stood up to my parents this way. I knew that they didn't like my wife and I was okay with it, but to go so far as to try to convince me to leave her for another woman was absolutely despicable. What really surprised me the most was that my brother was in on this. We were close growing up, and he has always supported my passion, but I never expected him to stand against my decision to get married to Elena. I think more than my parents, it hurts me more that my brother betrayed me. He could have easily given me a heads up so I could have avoided all this, yet he chose to stay silent. I am planning on calling my brother tomorrow after I have calmed down from this whole situation. Update 2. As promised, I am back with an update. I texted my brother, Alan, to give me a call whenever he was free, as I knew that he stayed busy at the farm the whole day. He called me during the evening, and I confronted him about what had happened between me and our parents. I straight up asked him if it was true that he had known about this all along. To my disappointment, Alan told me that he indeed knew about it, and he thought Gigi was a wonderful woman who could make me happy if I gave her the chance. I told him how wrong the entire family was to treat me and Elena this way when we had done nothing for them to warrant such hate for us. Alan then told me that everyone loved me and wanted to be happy. So I asked Alan what made him specifically think that I was not happy with Elena. He took a moment to think and then told me that I needed to realize the fact that Harry was never going to be my real son. He believed that I needed to divorce Elena so I could marry Gigi and hopefully we could start a family, which could take our family legacy forward and keep our traditions alive. I couldn't believe what I was hearing from my brother. It was clear that my brother had become too influenced by what my parents wanted, and as their beloved son, he wanted to only do things that they approved of. Hence, when I didn't listen to my family and married someone they hated, my brother didn't understand me. We argued back and forth some more, and it became clear that he was not going to support my marriage. He suggested that maybe I should consider their perspective and think about the consequences of my actions, as this would seriously affect our family. Feeling betrayed and hurt, I ended the call. I won't lie, but I cried a bit after my call with my older brother. I had never imagined that a day would come when my own brother would treat me and my wife so despicably. I knew that if my family, including my brother, thought this way about my marriage, then there was no way that they would ever change their mind. I did not want to ever subject Elena and Harry to this toxic drama. I have never regretted marrying her. Hence I needed to let go of people who didn't want to be a part of our life. I want Harry to grow up around people who genuinely love him and support him. Update 3. Thanks to everyone for your continued feedback on my post. This post seems to have gone viral, and I am getting multiple requests from strangers for an update, so here it goes. It's been 5 months now since my last update, and my life has been a bit more peaceful ever since my last argument with my family. I've been wanting to adopt Harry legally, so that no one can ever question me whether or not he is my son. Last week, I finally had a conversation with my wife and her parents regarding this. It was a heartwarming sight to see the smiles on their faces as they supported my decision. Harry's birth father, Nick, has never been present, and while Nick's parents provide monthly child support, they have remained uninvolved in Harry's life since his birth. The legal process might be a challenging journey, but I have been with Harry and watched him grow up for so many years, so I can't wait for the day when he can be legally recognized as my son. Now, coming on to my parents, they never apologized to me since the incident. They never once acknowledged how disappointing their actions were in trying to break my marriage. After my last talk with my brother, I just texted my parents in the family group chat expressing that I couldn't handle their negativity and drama anymore. I wished them well for the future and made it clear that they shouldn't reach out to me. In response, my mother sent a threatening message saying if I didn't do what they wanted, they would ensure I wasn't included in their will. I didn't bother replying back to her because, with all honesty, I don't really care. I hope they leave everything behind for my brother and his family, as I'm quite happy with what I have. Meanwhile, my wife and I have been doing great these past few months. Initially, Elena was very hurt by what my parents did on that day, but over time, she has let go. She is the sort of kind-hearted person who believes that we should always focus on the positive things in our life, which I wholeheartedly agree with. Every morning, I wake up feeling joyous, watching her lay next to me. Her peaceful face a reminder of the love we share. We have always found strength in one another, no matter what challenges life throws our way, and will continue to do so in the future. I hope this will be my last update regarding this incident, and as I want to close this chapter forever and focus on my life ahead. Now on to the next story. Story 3. I spent the day with my sister's best friend, and now she's telling my parents that I'm a home wrecker. So this all started yesterday when I, 22F, had a date planned with a guy. He ended up not showing, and so naturally, I texted the group chat about it. My sister is in this particular group chat. I'm guessing my sister, Sarah, 26F, told her best friend, Jay, 27M, about it because a few minutes later, Jay texted me to ask if I'm okay. I told him yes, just a little disappointed since I was pretty excited to try that particular restaurant. He said that he would pick me up at noon the next day so we could go eat there. I told him it wasn't necessary, but he insisted, so I agreed, thinking nothing of it. Well, today he took me out as promised, and while we were eating, Sarah FaceTime called Jay. When he didn't answer, she called again and again. He answered the fourth call and asked her what was going on. She said that she was just checking up on us and told me to call her later. Later ended up being almost 8 o'clock. Jay and I ended up spending the rest of the day together, hunting down some collectible dolls we both like and trying different dessert spots along the way. On the way back to my apartment, Jay asked me to change the music on his phone. When I opened it, I saw that my sister had called him about 30 times throughout the day and texted him across multiple different apps. Jay put his phone on Do Not Disturb after lunch, so it made sense why he didn't see those notifications. Once he dropped me off, I called my sister and asked her if everything was all right. She said yes and asked if I had forgotten to call her back sooner. I told her that I was out with Jay, so I didn't get the chance and figured it could wait since she didn't call me. She hung up, and a few minutes later, I got a call from my mom. She sounded angry and told me that I should be ashamed of myself. I said sure, but why today? According to my mom, Sarah called her in tears, saying that she had caught Jay and I having sex in their apartment. I was so confused. I told my mom that I did not, in fact, have sex with Jay and that I didn't even know they lived together. I asked her to give me a minute and I called Jay, but he didn't answer. So now I'm here laying on my floor wondering what the hell is going on and putting off another conversation with my mom. Update. So I'm not religious or anything like that, but Jesus Christ, thank you everyone for your kind words and support. I don't know what to do with myself. Also, I meant to post an update yesterday, but my friend asked me to go watch the Miguel O'Hara movie with her, and then I just forgot. Sorry about that. I wanted to clear up some confusion before the update on my original post. When my mom told me that Sarah and Jay shared an apartment, I said I didn't even know they lived together. Those were my verbatim words to her because last I knew, Sarah had a roommate, and Jay lived alone. I was right. That's still the case. Sorry I wasn't clear about that. I'm bad at expressing myself sometimes. Another thing was people were wondering how Jay found out about my date or lack thereof. According to him, he was hanging out with a few of his friends, including my sister, and she told him about it in a joking way. Another thing is that some people are asking why I went out with Jay if I knew my sister liked him. I didn't know. Just because I talk to my sister doesn't mean she talks to me the same way. If I had known, I would have talked to her about it first because I know from past experience that my sister is a jealous person. Anyway, last night was a doozy. Jay called me back. He said he was going to stay at a friend's because he would feel safer with company. I asked him if there had ever been anything romantic between him and my sister. He said the only thing was that he kissed her at a New Year's party at midnight because she was feeling left out. Obviously, I can't confirm if that really is the only thing. He also said that he had never even talked about moving in with Sarah, so he doesn't know why she would say they were living together. After I spoke with Jay, I called my mom again. She still sounded pissed, but this time I could hear my sister crying in the background and my dad yelling to get our asses over there. Our being Jay and I, presumably. Well, as I told my mother earlier, I didn't have Jay's ass, and I don't like to drive at night, so I told them I would go the next morning. That also gave me time to gather any evidence I could to prove my innocence. Jay even sent me a copy of his lease to prove that he and Sarah do not live together. I went to my parents alone because Jay has a job. As soon as I arrived, my parents started yelling at me. Just the usual stuff that I was disrespectful, but they never expected this from me. How dare you do this to your own sister? You know she already has a hard time. Why make her life harder? My dad even called me a jerk. That was fun. I kind of just sat there and did the math on how much faster I would be able to finish my grad program and flee the country, or at least the state. I wasn't very tuned in until my mom told me that if Sarah lost her job because of me, that I would need to financially support her until she found another one. That's when I snapped and told them that if they thought I was going to do that, then they were as delusional as my sister. Missing one day of work because of a tantrum over something that didn't even happen was not going to get her fired. My dad said that Sarah had been missing work to make sure that Jay wasn't leaving work early to go see me. I found out my sister also told them that Jay was missing a lot of work, so he wasn't taking enough home for their bills, so they had been sending her rent money for months. I told them it wasn't true, and I showed them the lease Jay sent where it clearly says the day the lease started and when it ends. It also had his address, which is not the same as Sarah's. My mom brought Sarah out of her room, where she had apparently been this entire time, and told her to explain herself. Sarah said that he probably got that other apartment so that he could be closer to me when he went on supposed business trips. First of all, Jay is a software developer. I don't know what business trips he would go on. Second, nice way to find out that my sister doesn't even know where I live because Jay's apartment is almost an hour away from mine. I showed my parents that on Google Maps, and they finally started to believe me. Sarah started crying and calling me a liar. My dad told me that even if what I said was true, I shouldn't have been so hard on her, and that as her sister, I should be helping her when she's having a rough time like this. I told him I wasn't a therapist, but if she ever decided to get help, I would pitch in. I left after that. There was nothing else I needed to say, and there was no point in waiting on an apology. My dad looked uncomfortable, and my mom was too busy consoling my sister to notice me leaving. I haven't talked to them since that. Sorry if you were expecting a fun update where I somehow got revenge on my sister or something crazy and petty. If you have questions, I'll probably answer. Thanks for caring though. And those of you that shared your own stories under my original post, damn sorry you went through that. A wild picnic led me back to the love of my life. However, my happiness is being tainted by his ex's home wrecker accusations about me. My partner, male, and I, female, are both 26. We recently started dating again, and it has been just under 2 months after a devastating breakup 3 years ago. We broke up due to long distance, as my dad had died, and I didn't have the emotional bandwidth to commit to a relationship. We never wanted to break up. Circumstances at the time were just bad. So, a few months ago, a good friend from school invited me to celebrate her parents' 50th renewal ceremony at a beautiful hill town, and they went all out with the celebration. I hadn't seen my then-ex at the time and was pleasantly surprised to see him when I saw him at the villa. I felt an instant flutter in my heart. After the party, my ex and I caught up and talked the whole night. We even shared a dance together. It was very warm, relaxing, and sweet. Felt like old times. I got to know he had a girlfriend already, and he had been with her for 1.5 years, and I was comfortable enough to make a flirty joke about how quickly he found a new girl. He was just the same person I once knew, and I was a little sad as well because I really wanted him back. I loved him still, and since he had the same feelings for me too, however, I tried to be respectful and didn't make a move. Before the trip, I already had plans to visit this winery that this hill town was known for. I invited my ex to come with me. I know, bold move. We had a great time wine tasting and sat together soaking up the sun on the grass and had a really lovely picnic. I was drunk and blurted out that I regret that our relationship ended, and if my dad was still here, we'd still be together. I told him I never stopped loving him and how he was and still is the love of my life. He reciprocated that he was in love with me too, but we didn't do anything physically. He decided that he needed to end things with his then-girlfriend, and after some time we started dating again. Honestly, I'm so glad my friend invited me, and I met my boyfriend. I know, as cheesy as it may sound, I feel that there was a bigger reason for us to suddenly meet again. I'm so in love with him, and so happy we are back together. My Instagram profile is open, and I posted 2 pictures in an album that showed how much we have grown. I'm ecstatic that we are together. In a way, it feels like my father's blessing from heaven. However, his ex sent a barrage of nasty messages to me and called me a home wrecker. I know that we got feelings for each other, but I don't think we had any control over that. We didn't do anything physically besides holding hands as it was getting a little cold at the winery during sunset, and all we both were was to be outstandingly honest with one another. And we only got together after he ended things with her. As soon as the trip was over, she has been contacting my friends and other people I know and saying horrible things about me. She has already called me horrible names and has attempted to tarnish my boyfriend's name to their common friends, who have been letting us know what she has been up to. All of this has been extremely upsetting to both of us, and I do not know how to put an end to it. I should have been cherishing our relationship and not having to deal with a scornful ex who's doing all of this for petty revenge. Now on to the next story. Story 4. Hello. Eleanor here. I'm a 59-year-old woman. My husband passed away about 5 years ago, but I'm still working. I have 5 kids, and 4 of them live in different states all across the country with their own families. I feel incredibly fortunate to have such a big family. One of my kids, Andrew, still lives in our hometown. Andrew went to the local community college where he met his wife. I really liked her, but I thought my opinion didn't matter as long as Andrew was happy. They got married soon after and continued their education together. After getting good jobs and earning enough, they decided to have a child. I was happy because it meant I had one more grandchild to spoil. However, Claire was acting strange about me meeting my grandchild, Ethan. She was very specific about when I could visit, which made sense in the first year after Ethan was born, but even when he was 6, it seemed odd still. I didn't say anything because every family has its own way of doing things. Before I knew it, 12 years had gone by. Because I wasn't allowed to spend much time with Ethan, I couldn't really build a strong connection with him. The only thing I knew was that we both loved books, so whenever I visited, I made sure to get him some books that I thought he'd enjoy. One day, I was at work when I got a call from Ethan. Now that was odd for various reasons. The most prominent reason being that Ethan and I barely spoke outside of family gatherings. I tried my best to connect with him the way that I had done with my other grandchildren, but he seemed way too distant. Grandma, are you free to talk? Yes, honey. Any time for you. Tell me, is everything okay? No. Why are you crying? Did you get hurt? Is there anybody at home who can help you? Mom and Dad are here, but do you need me to call them for you? No. I called you because I needed your help. My help? What can I help you with, darling? I need you to save me. Ethan, what are you talking about? Don't laugh, Grandma. I'm sorry, honey. That was not what I was expecting you to say. I'm not kidding. If you aren't going to help me, I'll find a different way. No, hold on. I'm sorry for laughing now. Why don't you explain what you meant? I need you to save me from my devil mom. Devil mom? Sweetie? What are you saying? She's not as nice as she seems. She's really mean to me when no one's around, and she keeps... Oh no! I hear someone coming up the stairs. I have to go. Please don't tell them that I've called you. I was confused and worried. From what I knew, Claire was one of the nicest people I knew. How could Ethan call her a devil? I didn't believe him at the time because I figured that it was just him trying to get back at Claire after all. She probably grounded him for something he had done. As far as I knew, from what both Claire and Andrew had told me, Ethan had been a pretty mischievous child. But I had this nagging feeling in my gut that Ethan was not joking around. So I went home that day. I couldn't stop thinking about the call. It was very out of character for Ethan to do that. I slept on it for a couple of days, but I still couldn't rid myself of the feeling that something was up. So I decided to make an impulse purchase and ordered a hidden camera. Of course, I felt wrong spying on my son and his family, but I justified it by telling myself that I was only doing that because Ethan called me to explicitly ask for my help. If and hopefully there was nothing, I could just retrieve the camera. But if there was an issue, then I'd need to find out what exactly needed to be fixed. I hoped that even if something was wrong, a good conversation could solve the problem. The camera took a couple of days to arrive, and once it did, I set it up. Luckily, this was one of those cameras that provided live footage and recorded videos. I could access the footage through an app on my phone, which made it very convenient for me. Once I had set it up and figured out the technicalities of the gauge, I decided to call my son and ask him if I could come over. Hello, sweetie. How's everything? Everything's great, Mom. What about you? It's the same old, same old. Although I was wondering about something, and I thought I'd ask you about it. Yeah, of course. Is everything okay? Yes. I was just thinking that we haven't met in a long time, and I was wondering if I could just swing by your place one day. Yes, of course, Mom. How about this Sunday? Yes, that works. But shouldn't you maybe check with Claire if that's okay? Lord knows I hated it when your dad made plans without asking me about it. I'm sure Claire would love to have you visit. Don't worry, Mom. Okay then. I'll be there around 5 o'clock. Sounds good. See you soon. Take care. Even though I was going to Andrew's place with different thoughts, I was really happy to spend time with my son. I usually only see the rest of my family during the holidays, so having one of my kids in the same town felt nice. I tried my best to not intrude because they were living their own lives. The weekend came by pretty quickly. I got ready pretty early on and figured that I should take something over to their place. I went to the grocery store and picked up a nice bottle of wine, and I bought a couple of books for Ethan because I knew he loved to read. When I got to my son's house, I was greeted warmly by all three of them. Ethan looked at me with so much relief that I got concerned again. He hadn't tried to contact me after that first phone call, so I had no way of knowing what he was going to say when he hung up. I spent the next couple of hours just talking to Andrew and Claire. We had dinner and drank wine. At some point, Ethan went to his room because we were talking about adult things that I bet weren't of interest to him, so I excused myself to go talk to Ethan. Claire did try to subtly stop me, but I insisted because I had visited them after a long while, and I didn't think it was right to not spend time with my grandson. Andrew interrupted Claire and asked me to go talk to Ethan. When I reached his room, I closed the door. I walked over to him and gave him the books I got for him. We chatted for a bit about the books and then he began to talk. He seemed really happy about them, so I let him keep talking. I didn't try to bring up what he had mentioned because I wanted him to do it. We moved on to talking about other things like what was going on in our lives. At some point, while he was talking to me about his school and other things, he grabbed one of his notebooks and began to write something in it. He showed it to me and it said, "Grandma's listening." I can't talk about anything. I couldn't tell if he was being serious or just paranoid, but I went along with it. We continued our conversation while I wrote my plan in the notebook. I told him that I had brought along a hidden camera with me and asked if I could plant it in his room. He seemed super happy and said yes right away. I moved around the room and found a good place for the camera. It had a good view of the room. I began recording and checked my phone to make sure the camera was working. I stayed with Ethan a bit more until I said it was getting late and I should leave. I did leave my scarf behind so I would have an excuse to come back whenever I needed to. I remember hearing footsteps hurriedly shuffling away from the door after I said that, and it made me wonder if Ethan truly was right. I didn't pay much mind to it at that time and I hugged Ethan goodbye. I went back downstairs and said my goodbyes to both Andrew and Claire, and then made my way back home. I was pretty exhausted from the night, but I did check the camera when I got back home. I stayed up for an hour to read and kept an eye on the footage just in case something happened. All that had happened was my grandson walked into Ethan's room and asked him what we had talked about. Ethan told him about it and that was that. I fell asleep, and when I woke up the next morning, I didn't check the cameras. I hurried to work, and I only looked at the camera when I knew Ethan would be back from school. When, once again, not much happened, and I started to believe Ethan might be telling the truth. I decided to wait just one more day, and if I didn't see anything, I would go over when neither Andrew nor Claire were home and ask Ethan to return the camera. But that night, as I kept an eye on the footage while I read, I found out what Ethan was trying to tell me. I watched Claire enter the room with a stick in her hand, with Andrew trailing behind her. I immediately unmuted the video, and I heard Claire ask Ethan what he did all day. She made him narrate it to her in extreme detail. Whenever he started, she would sharply ask him if he was lying, and if she felt like he was, she had him put his palms out and would deliver 2 to 3 swift raps against his knuckles. I watched in growing horror as the number of times she kept hitting him got more and more frequent. Ethan was sobbing, and Andrew just stood there and watched. I was disappointed and disgusted with what I was watching. I had raised all my kids in a very gentle manner. I barely even yelled at them because I believe that kids are smarter than we think. While we may not be able to reason with them, they are capable of understanding when you explain things to them. I didn't understand why Andrew was just standing there and letting his son get hit for something so unnecessary. I wanted to quickly go to their place and intervene, but what would I say to them? They might find it strange that I came back just a day after my last visit. I recalled leaving my scarf there, but I couldn't use that excuse at that moment because I needed it as a reason to meet with Ethan. But I could do one thing. I picked up my phone and called Andrew. "Hey, Grandma, is everything okay?" "Yes, no worries. I hope I'm not disturbing you." No. Claire and I were just saying good night to Ethan." "All right then. I just wanted to tell you that I think I left my scarf in Ethan's room last night. I remember setting it down there and then, like a klutz, I forgot it there. Did you think I could swing by tomorrow and pick it up? Why don't I just come over and drop it off for you right now?" "No, I'm way too tired, and I'm gonna fall asleep before you even get here. I had a long day at work, and I'm barely even holding up the phone right now." "All right then. Why don't you swing by in the evening?" "I can't do that. I'm meeting up with a couple of my friends for game night tomorrow." "Well, Claire and I won't be back till evening. Why don't you swing by the day after? I need that scarf for tomorrow. We're having a themed get-together of sorts." "Well, you could swing by the afternoon. Ethan will be home." "Oh great. I'll be there around 2. "Good night, Grandma." My heart raced as I made up lies on the spot. At least my call distracted Andrew and Claire enough for them to talk about what I said to Andrew instead of focusing on Ethan. But before they left Ethan's room, Claire announced that Ethan wouldn't get any dinner or other meals until the next day's dinner. I was appalled. I wished I didn't believe that Claire and Andrew would follow through, but from what I saw, I knew that wouldn't be the case. The next day, I took off from work and mentally prepared myself for the conversation that I was going to have with Ethan. I was sure that he would not want to continue living there, but I still needed to hear him say that before I went over to Andrew's place. I made sure to pick up some food for both of us. When I got there, Ethan looked like he was about to faint at any minute. He looked weak and he was very lethargic. Claire really did make him not eat anything. I quickly gave him his food and watched as he devoured it. I felt so sorry for him, and I knew that I wanted to make things better for him. After he finished eating, I talked to him. Did you see everything that happened? Yes, Grandma, and I'm so sorry for laughing at you earlier. I had no idea. No, it's okay. I know Grandma seems like the nicest person, but has she always been this way? The beating only started recently, but the starving has been going on for a while, and I just need to get a clearer understanding. So could you tell me why Andrew isn't doing anything? He's too scared of Grandma. He just follows her everywhere and listens to everything she says. Everything she wants, she gets. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry that you've been dealing with this for a while, but I am curious. Why didn't you eat anything at school? Grandma didn't send me to school on days that she doesn't let me eat. I stay home. Grandma measures how much of each food is there in the house, and if it's even 1 gram off when she gets back, I get punished more. So she's starving you and jeopardizing your education. I'm definitely going to do my best to help you out. Okay, I need you to tell me right now if you would like to come live with me. I'll take care of everything you need, and I'll keep you away from Grandma and Grandpa. Of course, Grandma. Anywhere away from here will be great. I promise to only be good. Just please take me away from here. Promise. I will, darling, but it will take some time. Do you think you can handle staying here for a little while longer? Sure, I can. I've been here for 12 years, so waiting a bit more is okay. I neatly removed all the wrappers and ensured there was no sign of any food left. I didn't want Claire to make things harder for Ethan. After that, I assisted Ethan in cleaning up any crumbs and then checked multiple times to make sure we left the place exactly as it was. I went back home and made sure to call Andrew to let him know that I had gotten my scarf back and thanked him for being cooperative. Next, I contacted a good friend of mine who worked with family law. I explained my situation to him, and he told me that it would be hard and long to fight for custody of Ethan. He also informed me that while I may be able to get custody, the judge may only give me a temporary one, and in that time, Claire could easily change up her behavior and get back her custody of Ethan. I knew that getting her to court and trying to fight for custody was definitely not going to work in my favor, especially with what little evidence I had. But I did know one thing. I could use the evidence I did have to get her to make me Ethan's legal guardian. You see, Claire worked as a counselor at one of the many middle schools in our district. I was sure that she wouldn't want her abusing her child to reach anywhere and take away her current job and future job prospects. I watched the videos closely over the next few days, collecting all my proof and organizing the paperwork for a guardianship transfer. I waited until the weekend to visit Andrew's place without telling them in advance. When Andrew opened the door, he looked surprised to see me. Grandma, why are you here? I said I need to talk to you and Grandma. Oh, I don't think now's a good time. Why? What's going on? Just family stuff. Hold on. How come you're suddenly over so frequently? I visit my son. I didn't think I needed to have any special permission to do that. No, I didn't mean it like that. It's just that you've taken a sudden interest in us this week. And it's weird because you rarely ever drop by before. It isn't really weird. I only came over today because I have something seriously important that I need to talk about with the two of you. I don't think... What's that sound? I knew that Grandma was doing something to Ethan because of how evasive Andrew was being. But when I heard what sounded like loud crying coming from Ethan's room, I pushed Andrew aside and walked into the house. There was no way I wouldn't protect him when I was right there. I rushed, well, more like walked quickly since I'm not very young, to Ethan's room and opened the door to find Ethan crying, holding his face. Grandma was breathing heavily, looking at him with so much hatred that it gave me shivers. I ran over to Ethan and asked him if he was all right. He just hugged me tight and wailed into my ears. Grandma huffed and walked away. When Ethan calmed down, I took a good look at him and noticed that his cheek was red and swelling up. His knuckles were bleeding, and there were welts on his arms, all from the stick. I felt a kind of rage in me that I had never felt before. What kind of a monster do you have to be to hit a child so hard? Nothing the child did deserved that level of treatment in any case. I went downstairs to the kitchen and grabbed a bag of frozen veggies and went back upstairs to give it to Ethan so he could use it to help reduce the swelling in his cheeks. Once I had made sure that he was okay, I told him that I would be taking him to my place that day and asked him to pack as many of his things as he could. With that, I walked back down to talk to both of them. Grandma looked mad, and Grandpa looked like he wanted to be anywhere but there. There was no way I wouldn't protect him when I was right there. I rushed, well, more like walked quickly since I'm not very young, to Ethan's room and opened the door to find Ethan crying, holding his face. Grandma was breathing heavily, looking at him with so much hatred that it gave me shivers. He may be your grandson, but you don't live with him. You don't know what a brat he is. I'm just disciplining him. Who cares if he's a brat? He's a child, and there are so many other ways to go about disciplining a child other than hitting them. I mean, you of all people should know this. Listen, I don't believe in any of that gentle parenting crap. Leave me and my family alone. You got it. I'm afraid I can't do that. What do you mean? I handed Grandma the papers that she needed to sign to transfer guardianship rights to me. Both she and Grandpa stared at the paper for a long minute before looking at me in utter confusion. I explained to both of them that they both had to sign the papers or I would be releasing the proof I had of them hitting Ethan. What do you mean by proof? I put a hidden camera in Ethan's room last week, and I have all the evidence I need. Your jobs won't like what you do, especially yours, Grandma. If you want to keep any income, I recommend signing the papers. You were spying on us? That's a big invasion of our privacy. Don't get me wrong, but I was only acting on information that I had. I needed to make sure Ethan was doing all right. Mom, don't do this to us. Give us another chance. I'll make sure it doesn't happen again. I don't want to hear any of it. I'm very disappointed in you, Grandpa. I raised you to be better than this. You're just as disgusting as Grandma, if not more. I'm taking Ethan with me, and I expect the papers to be signed after. If you don't, you know what will happen. I knew that neither of them wanted to play with that kind of risk, so they didn't put up a fight when Ethan and I walked out. I took Ethan to go get dinner and ice cream, and I tried my best to comfort him. I gave him a safe place to talk about his feelings and be without worrying about one small thing causing problems. In the next few weeks, I became Ethan's legal guardian. Grandma and Grandpa mentioned they were moving to another state and didn't want to disturb Ethan's education, so they agreed to transfer guardianship. The two of them did end up moving, which proved to be a big sigh of relief for me. Ethan is doing much better now, and he seems a lot happier. Knowing that he won't ever run into his grandparents for a long while has brought about a better side to him. He's one of the kindest and sweetest kids I know. He thanks me every day for what I did for him, and I plan to keep my promise to always protect him for the rest of my life. Now on to the next story. Story 5. I found out my wife cheated years ago, right before her sister's wedding. Then I had to watch her dance with the guy. The time frame is important here. We have been married for 3 years. We were together as a couple for 2 years before that, so we've been together for about 5 years. 2 weekends ago, her sister got married, and of course, my wife was in the wedding party. So, as you would expect, she spent the 2 weeks prior to the wedding helping her sister get everything ready. No big deal at all. She kept me informed, and I knew this was going to happen. She took that Wednesday to Friday off of work to help her and, in fact, stayed with her days. I certainly know her sister, but I barely know the guy who is now my brother-in-law. In fact, I only met him a few times, but he seems nice enough. I show up Saturday morning a few hours before the ceremony in hopes of stealing just a few minutes to see her, not wanting to intrude on the day since I know she is busy. But I hadn't seen her since Tuesday. She sees me outside of her parents' house and sends her brother out to tell me that she will come out and see me at the car, which I thought was odd, but whatever. She finally comes out and sits in the seat next to me and gives me a kiss. But instead of acting happy to see me or whatever, she tells me that she has to talk to me and she doesn't want it to ruin her sister's day. She informs me that at the reception, if I still want to go, I might hear some things about the best man in her, and she didn't want it to be awkward or weird. I just kind of sat there, stunned. She said that about 4 years ago she had a fling with him and that it didn't mean anything, but she was aware that by nature I'm somewhat jealous, and she wanted me to know in advance so that if I heard something I wouldn't be surprised. Again, I just kind of sat there. This was not how I thought my morning would go, but I told her I appreciated knowing it and that it certainly wasn't a big deal now. She went back in the house, and I went to eat lunch and decided to meet her at the church. As I'm eating and reading my phone, it dawns on me. She said she had a fling with him 4 years ago, and we've been together 5. My first reaction was to blow it off and think that she just told me the wrong time. But the more I thought about it, the more I started to remember about a year and a half of us being together. She had a phase where she was really sketchy about her behavior, wasn't available when she normally was, and went on 2 weekend camping trips that were with friends from work. Of course, I'm a little knotted up over this, but I know I have a long day ahead of me. I go to the wedding and sit there watching everything. After the wedding, they have a line that you walk by and congratulate the bride and groom, and the wedding party is standing in line as well. My wife is standing with some other guy. I don't know him at all, but the best man was there, and I just went down the line and acted like no big deal. I get to the reception, and it takes forever for them to come because of photos. She finally gets there and sits with me. I decided not to say anything as I didn't want to distract from the day, but instead of just letting it go, she then tells me that each of the groomsmen and bridesmaids are going to dance and that she is going to be dancing with him. I asked why when she was not his partner for the party, and she said that the maid of honor and her partner were actually married and wanted to dance with each other. At this point, I'm a little more than perturbed, but I try and not let it show. Thankfully, I was smart enough to not drink because I freely admit I'm an angry drunk, so I know when not to even partake. She talks to everyone around her, and then the dance comes, and he comes over and extends his arm, and she gets up. I try not to watch, and, in fact, I make it a point not to. She comes back with him in tow, and they are joking like the best of friends. She decides that it would be a good idea to introduce us, and while I didn't say to F off like I wanted to, my greeting to him was probably not cordial, but it did not deter him from sitting and talking with her for a few minutes. The more they sat and talked and reminisced about old times and places, the madder I got. Eventually, I got up and went to the bathroom, and when I came back, he was gone. She decided to tell me that she thought I was rude, which was not what I was all about hearing at the moment. I told her that this wasn't the time or place to talk about it, but rest assured, we would talk later. She sat there and then said that she was going to change clothes, and as soon as she got back, she was telling her sister that we were leaving because I had ruined her day, but she didn't want me to ruin her sister's day as well. I told her that I was perfectly capable of not being a bother to her or her sister the rest of the day, and that I did not want to be the cause of any drama, so I would prefer to just stay. She went and changed clothes and then came back all in a huff. Now understand, I have not said a word to her. I even shook the other guy's hand. I guess I just looked miserable, so that is what she was basing this off. She was adamant about not staying, and so I said that if she really wanted to go, we could go. But if she would rather stay, I would be happy to stay, or if she would like, since I came in my own car, I would leave so she could stay. She at first said that we should stay, but then said if I couldn't act any better, I should leave. I asked how I was acting, and she said it was obvious I was trying to be like a silverback gorilla wanting to fight. I didn't know whether to laugh in her face or be offended. I went back in and sat down while she mingled with the other guests. I talked with her brother for a while, but then ultimately ended up back at our table talking with her grandma. We leave at the same time, and I arrived home just before she did. I was sitting in the living room waiting on her when she came in and did not beat around the bush. I simply asked her to retell me the story about this other guy, and she said it word for word like before. After sitting and looking at her for a time, I just said, "Are you sure about the time frame?" And she said she was. I then reminded her that we had been together for 5 years. So this fling was well over a year into our being together. What happened next I can't really put into words. Instead of being flustered or denying or anything, she simply said, "I know." So I asked her to explain, and she tells me that they worked together and that it was just a physical thing, and she felt like we weren't in a great place at the time, and that she never had any feelings for him and never had any real intentions of leaving me. She just was having some fun for a few weekends. She said that it was probably a mistake on her part to tell me now, but she didn't want me to get blindsided. I did not take this the way she thought I would. I guess we had a very large argument and ended when she told me I was being a child about all of this, that we were married and this happened way before that, and our life together now has nothing to do with him or that time. Well, 2 things. 1, I adamantly disagree about this having no bearing on us. She effing cheated on me and doesn't even have the decency to feel guilty about it. 2, I hate being told I am childish when I get upset over something. Pisses me off to no end because that is her way of acting superior to me. I told her I needed time to think, and she told me there was nothing to think about. We loved each other, and this didn't change anything. That was 2 weeks ago, and I still am not over it. She has been trying the past few days to get me to talk to her, but I admit that for whatever reason, I'm not viewing her the same as I did before. This part of me is like, this is stupid. It happened a few years ago, and we are married now, and there hasn't been any problems at all. But then part of me is like, I just found out she cheated on me, and it hurts like a mother effer, and what makes it worse is that instead of trying to understand how I feel, she is trying to guilt me into just not even thinking about it. I don't know what to do. I'm sorry for the length. I probably should have cut out some of the wedding stuff, but it all came out at once. Date 1. First, I want to clarify something from my first post that I really did not spell out very well. It doesn't have any real bearing on anything, but for some reason, it bugs me that I made this part sort of murky. The maid of honor, not my wife, was married to the groomsman who my wife walked down the aisle with. There were some people who felt my wife was trying to arrange the dance, but I do know for a fact that this part was legit. However, it doesn't mean she didn't try and offer to let them dance or any other form of manipulation, but I just wanted to try and clear that part up a little. I'm here because I have gotten honest to God over 40 requests for an update since last week. Thank you for you guys' concern on this, and I wish I had some really ballsy statement to make about how I stood tall and kicked her to the curb, but sadly, that is just not what happened. To be blunt, I'm in limbo. There have been developments, but all they have done is make it harder for me to decide. Last week, I was mostly angry. Then, as the weekend progressed, I became mostly sad. I want to be able to hate her and flip that switch that tells me I'm being walked on and I'm a sucker, but it's just very hard for me to do that because I still love her, and this is ripping me apart. Here is what has happened of any consequence. She finally came to the realization that I was not going to just get over this. This then brought her to the realization that I might want out of the marriage. This then brought on a near nervous breakdown from her. Someone, hell a lot from the first post, stated that she would try and manipulate me like that, and believe me, I was taking those words to heart when I thought she was having crocodile tears, but it soon became apparent to me that she wasn't acting or faking. She was having a legitimate panic attack. This led to an ER visit, and that led to an overnight stay in the hospital, and then to new medications and a scheduled follow-up with her doctor for later next week. This brought her family into it, and that in turn led to long conversations all the way around when we got home with her family in tow. I asked what she wanted to do since there was a house full of people, and she said she wanted to be with her mom for a while. That was fine with me, as I had no desire to hang around all day with her dad or sister. So I said I was going to go finish up something at work and would be home later. 2 hours after I get there, I get a text from her begging me to please come home and that she really needs me to talk with her. So I finish up what I was doing and head home. I am greeted on my own front porch by her dad, who asks if he can talk to me for a minute. My anger level was already somewhat high, but I was ready to go to war if she had dumped a sea sack of lies on me with her dad. I mean, it's not like he and I are best friends in the sea, but I've never had a bad moment with him, so I really wasn't going to be happy about being the idiot who broke his baby's heart. We sat on our deck chairs, and he effing floored me with his opening salvo. I was expecting to hear anything but what he said. He said that she told them what had happened and that he wanted to apologize to me because he said that he felt like he did a really crappy job as a parent and that this mindset that she had was really a creation of her mother's, and that while he loved both of them, he said they were wrong, and he had told his wife years ago that telling the girls that whatever happens before marriage doesn't count was a horrible idea and value system to install in them. He then said that he wasn't there to stand up for what his daughter did, but he just wanted me to be aware that what she was saying and how she was acting was simply because she honestly believed that being married was an entirely different life, in that they, mom and dad, had romanticized marriage to the point that she wasn't understanding real life. Basically, he was kind of throwing his wife under the bus. But again, this is not what I was expecting at all. We shook hands, and he said that no matter what I decided, he still thought very highly of me, which honestly made me feel really good for that moment. I then went inside, and my wife is curled up in a ball on her mom's lap, and you can tell she has been crying the entire time I've been gone. Mom gets up and comes and hugs me and tells me she is sorry, and that she loves me, and she is praying that we can work this out. My wife is laid out on the couch at this point. Her mom and dad leave, and she sits there looking at me and crying. Okay, this is where I'm gonna piss off everybody and just tell you that I couldn't take it. I went to her, and we hugged for a long time with her telling me over and over how sorry she was. Hey, I know it was the weak thing to do, but again, I have to say in my defense that just before this incident occurred, I loved her with all of my heart and would have done anything to not see her in pain. Whatever she had done, I still didn't want to see her like that. Look, it's very possible that she was putting on an Oscar-worthy acting job, but I don't honestly think so. She really seemed broken at that point in time. After a while, when she calmed down, I asked her what she wanted me to come home and talk about, and she said she wanted to get everything out in the open so I didn't feel like I was being lied to or manipulated. So she wanted me to ask her questions, and I wish I had written down a list, but I came up with a few off the top of my head. She was brutally honest with me, and some of the questions I asked I probably shouldn't have because now the mental image is stuck in there, but honestly, it was there anyway. I just now have confirmation. First, I asked for dates or at the very least approximate dates. I didn't tell her about the engagement concern I had because I didn't want her to change stories, and she remembered exactly when they occurred. Fortunately, this happened a little earlier in our relationship than she told me initially, and so we were not engaged when this happened. I can't tell you what a relief it was because I became physically ill when I thought about that when someone said it in my last post. Second, I asked how many times she went overboard with this because instead of just telling me how many different dates, she decided to tell me how many times there was penetration. She wasn't doing it to be mean. She honestly thought that is what I wanted to know. This part of the conversation did not help me any at all and, in fact, almost broke me down. In truth, it wasn't that often, and in fact, there were really only 3 different days it happened on, but there were several times during those 3 days. Then came the hard part. Why did she do it? Okay, again, I'm not the most manly of men, and I am ashamed to admit this, but I couldn't get this out without starting to cry. I asked why wasn't I good enough? Why him? Why did she not just leave me? It was her turn to hold me because at this point, everything came rushing at me. Her telling me having to watch them laugh with each other, her now telling me how many times they did it and where they did it. She talked during this, but to this moment, I have no idea what she said. I was too upset, and honestly, nothing she was going to say was going to make a bit of difference anyway. But after I composed myself, I simply told her that the betrayal was horrible, but honestly, her response to me when I found out was just as bad, if not worse. She agreed with me, and she apologized for calling me immature. She said that she honestly believed that it wouldn't matter to me now because we were married. When she said this, my blood started to boil again. I started to say something about it, but she jumped in and said that after talking with her parents, she now sees that this was very wrong of her and that cheating is cheating, but she still feels like that our happiness that we have shared since being married should count for something. I then replied that I kind of felt like that happiness was built on a lie. This led to another breakdown on her part and almost another ER visit. But between Xanax and having her breathe into a paper sack, we got her calmed down. I let her sleep the rest of the night, feeling like emotionally we were both tired, but come Sunday we were talking again. By this time, I wasn't as sympathetic as I had been when we got home from the ER. I told her that I thought her introducing him to me was crappy, me having to watch her dance with him was extra crappy, and the fact that she only told me because she was going to get caught was an elite level of crappy. Which then I demanded to know why did she think I would find out and how many of the effing people at the wedding knew besides me. Well, obviously the guy knew, but then his best friend in the world also knew. Did I mention that he is now my brother-in-law, which then led to her sister finding out, and she was afraid her sister was going to be the one to tell me. I asked how often she sees this guy, and she said that the wedding is the first time she has seen him in 3 years. Then I lost my crap and asked her if she effed him during any of the lead up to the wedding. She got all pissy about it, acting like she wouldn't F anyone because she was married, and I just lost my crap and had to leave for a while because once again I felt like she was living on Married Planet or some such crap, and the world there is a different place than for the rest of us. I finally got cooled off enough to come home and try and be civil about things. She finally asked me what she could do to help me get past all of this, which may not sound like much, but it was the first time she offered to help me really, so it was at least a nice gesture. I told her I wasn't sure what she could do or if there was anything either of us could do, and that I may never get over this. She said that she wanted to help because she didn't want to see me in pain and that over the years, she hopes I'll be able to judge her based on who she is now. She would do anything I wanted to work this out. She also wanted to be sure that I knew that she has been 100% faithful since we've been married and would never cheat on her vows. I sarcastically thanked her, which I admit wasn't the most mature thing to do. I then asked for a moratorium from further talks until at least Wednesday. I have 2 projects I have to get done, and honestly, I'm just exhausted and know I have no effing clue what I want to do. I shift between periods of red-hot anger where I want to kick her out and then periods of deep emotional turmoil where I want to just forget this and move forward with her. Yes, I know this is not what anyone wanted to hear, and no, I'm not proud to type it, but it is what it is at the moment. Update 2. I've been absolutely overwhelmed by the responses I have received over this. I've gotten over 400 private messages, and I just cannot respond to all of them or any of them anymore, as it would take me a week to do that. I want to thank all of you who have written to me and those of you who this struck a chord with. All I can say is that I'm sorry you had to go through this as well. I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. I do want to say one thing though. The vast majority of the people contacting me via PM were all afraid to bring up their point of view in the open for fear of being harassed. I have honestly taken both points of view into consideration, and there has been some great advice and not so great, but I think people's hearts are in the right place. I just wish that if people disagreed with each other, they wouldn't feel the need to demonize a person because of a point of view. Okay, for the hundreds of you that have been clamoring for an update, here it is. As you know, I asked to just drop it until last night so I could focus on a job-related item I had to get done. She kept her word about it, but I could tell she was very emotional and honestly nervous. She is taking some strong meds for her anxiety, but even as strong as it is, I can still see how anxious she had been. I wasn't intentionally trying to punish her. In fact, quite the opposite. I really was trying to give her a break as much as me, but she told me last night that not holding her or showing any real affection towards her was almost torture to her. Well, last night finally arrived, and we had what my dad always called a come-to-Jesus meeting. I got home from work, and I brought dinner so there would be no distractions of cleanup or anything. We started talking around 6 and finally ended around 2-ish. In that time frame, we laid out a lot of issues that have been present and what are if we are both willing to do to move forward. Long story short, starting today, I am living with my brother for the next few. Not sure how long. She is understandably upset by all of this, and I am making an effort to communicate openly with her, so she does not feel abandoned or neglected. If you're wondering how we got from talking to me living with my brother, here it is in a nutshell. I know this is not going to make several of you very happy, but here is where I'm going with this. I want to save my marriage, but I can't do it living what I feel was somewhat a lie. I know she never intended to lie once we were married, but when I sat down and thought about this one question, would I have stayed with her if I had known at the time she did this each and every time? I answered no. So, to me, she took away my ability to choose whether or not I wanted to continue, and we built the next few years based on the foundation of something that wasn't quite true. However, the truth is we still built something. Sometimes foundations can be repaired, and sometimes you have to tear them down to build new. This is what I'm hoping to do. I'm hoping to shake things up enough for both of us so that we can start over. Like I said in the very first post, our marriage until this point had been what I would consider to be perfect or as perfect as any one thing can be, but there were some very troubling things that occurred due to this, and here is a brief synopsis of our talk. I laid out the fact that while I absolutely was upset about the cheating, and yes, I still consider it cheating, which she has now come to realize that this is the way it is and is going to be considered, I was equally upset by her lack of consideration for my feelings on this. I told her that I resented being told I was immature and a child for something that, objectively speaking, I had every right to be upset about. Her response was to apologize and tell me she was in the wrong and that while she admits fault and sees what I'm saying, that at the time she had convinced herself that because we were married, that I was wrong to be upset about something that happened beforehand, but she now sees where this is wrong. I then told her that I felt very disrespected by her associating with this guy right in front of me and that I felt humiliated having to shake his hand. Her response was to once again apologize, and she said that in her mind at the time, she felt like she was trying to show me that there was nothing there. She said she felt like if she avoided him or acted shady around him, that I would be more upset. I told her she was wrong. She said that out of all of the things, this is the one that has hit her the most in the face because even her sister has told her how poor this was for her to do to me, and she was deeply hurt by this because it had hurt me, which she never wanted to do. I then talked about her lack of remorse over being with someone else while we were together. Her only response was to say that she was very sorry, that at the time she just used very poor judgment, and if she could go back and change the past, she would. Then came the talk that got the most discussion, how I felt like she really wasn't sorry for anything, but that she was just sorry that I didn't just shrug my shoulders and say that everything was going to be okay, that there were going to be repercussions for what I consider to be an act of betrayal and then an act of not caring about me. I'll give her full credit here. She was brutally honest about this. And at least she was, so we didn't have to spend hours trying to work our way around it. She admitted that when we got home after the event, she started to realize that I wasn't going to let this go. And then as time went on, she knew that this was an issue. Her first instinct was to be mad at me for being mad at her, but then realized even from her own point of view how stupid that was. But again, she had it beat into her head that she was my wife and that I should easily forgive and forget something that happened way before we were married. She also admitted that when it became real, she frankly outright panicked thinking about losing her marriage. Nobody on either side of her family is divorced, so she could be the first, and she admitted to that being a big factor in her panic attack. But as the week has progressed, and she has spoken more to her family, she is seeing that what she has put in her mind about marriage isn't the end-all be-all she thought it was. She also did really feel bad about bringing the guy around to me. However, you will notice, which I did too, that she never said she felt guilty about being with him. Now, I want everyone to know this as well. What I have given you from above is a brief synopsis of events. She sounds like a robot in this version. And believe me, she was not. There were lots of tears. Real honest tears. There were a few curse words, and there were even moments of pleading and begging. As I said, this went on for 8-ish hours, so by the time we were done, she was physically exhausted. I have set out the following steps if we are to reconcile, and it is totally up to her if she wants to stay together. She is very, very adamant about staying together, by the way. I don't care how illogical it seems. She is to never have contact with him again. This is an absolute for me and a deal breaker, and I was absolutely clear on this. We have to have couples therapy while I am living with my brother. We are still legally married, and this is not an invitation or excuse for either of us to see anyone else again. Deal breaker in a second. If either of us uses this as an excuse, believe me, I will not let it, and I don't believe she will either. We start over to a point. I have to view her differently now, even if I didn't want to. I can't just forget that she chose to cheat, so that's where we are now. I know that this is not what some of you wanted, but ultimately, I have to go with what I believe will make me happiest in the long run. My head says be aware, and I am going to guard my heart for a long time, but my heart is still in love with her. We are going out on a date Friday night, which she is really looking forward to. I have no idea how long I will be with my brother. Hell, I may not make it past Friday, but if nothing else, I feel like I have some control here, which I felt prior to the talk. I had almost none in the end. I held her for a long time and we slept together. I do not want a broken woman right now. That is kind of what she is. I want her to be my partner for life, but I do want her to know that to be a partner, she has to equally care about my feelings as I do hers. P.S. I had to do some real hard thinking about my new brother-in-law. Again, I've only met him a few times and he seems like a nice enough guy, but at the end of it all, he certainly was aware of the issue. But just to keep peace in the family, I'm going to not make a stink about him because that will certainly make every holiday tough going forward. As long as he never mentions the incident or the guy ever again to or around me, I can live with it. Edit. This post has been up for 40 minutes, and I've received 21 comments, but I've gotten already 28 PMs. I think it's just sad that people feel so intimidated by the groupthink that they won't post their views publicly. I am happy to get the advice and words of support, but really, nobody should be afraid to speak their mind. Edit 2. Sorry, I guess I kind of forgot to address this. It's not going to make anyone happy, but here goes. The truth is, she knew perfectly well that what she did was cheating. She has never denied that. However, what she did do was think that being married was like crossing the finishing line and that basically, she got by with it. She hid it because she knew if I knew, it would be over. However, where her shock was that if I knew it after being married, that I would still think of it as a big deal and ultimately could end the marriage. I'm not sure if I was plain enough, so let me rephrase. She damn well knew it was wrong and that it would have ended us if I ever found out about it. However, she thought that repercussion ended when we got married. She genuinely was shocked that I still was counting it as cheating because it did not happen in the confines of holy matrimony. Yes, believe it or not, even though she did this and has some other issues that would make you scratch your head, she is devoutly Christian, as you can tell. I am not, so while I think it's a crock of crap, there is a very certain religious aspect into what she sees as marriage. Update 3. Thank you all who keep sending me messages of encouragement and wondering what has happened. For those of you who have asked me to give you an update, here is a brief one. I've been staying with my brother for a little over a month. I cannot say enough nice words about him. He has bent over backwards to help me, and I've come to appreciate him in a whole new way. Growing up, we were close, but never really close, if you know what I mean. This has shown me that our bond is much stronger than I ever imagined it was. The big news is that I have delivered her with divorce papers. Now, before those of you who wanted me to dump her jump for joy, let me explain something. I went to a divorce lawyer and explained everything, including the fact that I did not want to go through with the divorce but wanted everything in place just in case. He drew up a divorce decree and made 3 copies. One he kept on file, one for her, and one for me. I decided to take the paperwork to her myself because I knew she would be upset, and I wanted to explain to her what was happening. I gave her the paperwork in a manila envelope and explained what it was before she opened it. I also made very clear to her that I was not going to do anything with it unless we both failed to meet the conditions we both agreed upon. I explained that I was committed to us, but I really needed to see that we were headed in the right direction, and that this was only there as a standby in case she didn't think I was serious. Well, this did not go over as well as I had hoped, and in retrospect, this was a mistake on my part. She had been doing everything in her power prior to that to live up to the agreement. We had been out on several dates prior to this that were great for both of us. In other words, my timing sucked. My intention was good, but it did make it look like I was not acknowledging the steps she was taking to make this work. This led to another giant anxiety attack that we could not get under control with her meds. So off to the ER we went again. This time, they gave her a shot and sent her home, and we both agreed that we would keep her family out of it this time. I stayed with her for 2 days just to make sure she was okay. This, of course, came up in our counseling session, and well, let's just say that I came across looking like a manipulative idiot, which again, in retrospect, I was. I ended up taking my copy and her copy and tearing it up in front of her. She doesn't know there is a 3rd copy, but I plan on having him discard that as well. So now, I pretty much feel like a monster because the look on her face when she got the divorce papers was something I never want to see again. She was so happy to see me that day, and then I gave her that, and an instant combination of sadness and terror. Other than that bump in the road, things have actually been going very well enough in fact that I'm moving back home this weekend. My brother has been great, but I'm cramping his style no matter what he says. It's been fun playing Xbox every night though, I won't deny it, but mostly, I'm going home because she has done everything I have asked of her, and I have put her through hell. I think she's paid a steep enough price, and I know she knows how serious this was. Also, in case I didn't mention this before, I do love her. She made a very stupid, selfish mistake, but it was years ago, and she had been almost the perfect wife up until the discovery. So I'm sorry to disappoint many of you, and I'm sure I will once again get many PMs telling me that I am a cuckold and an embarrassment to all men. But I don't live your lives, and you don't live mine, so this should be it. There hopefully will be nothing to update going forward. We are not cured or healed by any sense of the imagination, but we are on our way, and it's just going to take time, patience, and understanding. Now on to the next story. Story 6. I cut back on work to prove a point to my wife. I think I made a big mistake. My wife is usually an angel of a woman, but has recently gotten into a friendship with a woman whom I personally believe is a bad influence on her. Not in a patronizing way, more of a lay down with dogs, get up with fleas type of situation. I never said anything about her childishness or her very radical mandry because, frankly, it doesn't affect me. Until it did a few months ago. My wife began pressuring me to do more around the house. Before I realized, we already split chores in childcare. Admittedly, she had a bigger cut than I because she is a song, but I do most of the cooking, breakfasts, and dinners. Lunch is her responsibility for her and the boys. I take out the garbage and I do laundry. I deep clean the bathrooms once a week. I do also help with our boys' homework and such. She insists that I am not doing enough and that I should be doing more around the house. I tried having discussions with her, asking what she expected from me, namely all chores and child rearing should be my duty, it seems. And for months it seemed to be going nowhere. She used the D word more than once when speaking on this, which felt manipulative. It boiled over when we were out with friends one night and she began talking about how I never helped out and how I use her as a house slave. Her words, "I will admit I saw red." This next part is where I may be the a-hole. I didn't say anything that night, but the next day I asked my boss to be given reduced hours for the next little bit due to stress. And I took over everything in the house. I cooked breakfast and made lunch for the boys before I drove them to school. I cleaned the house top to bottom. I did every dish we had twice and so on. My wife was blindingly happy and bragged to her friend that she finally had me worn in. She didn't lift a finger for around a month. Then she began asking why we never went on dates anymore and complaining that she wanted to get her nails done as they were growing in. I explained that I had to take that out of our budget so we could continue to afford everything else, but we could absolutely have a movie night in and I could paint her nails for her. She was unhappy with that solution, so I asked her if she would want to get a part-time job to pay for either luxuries. You would have thought I asked if she wanted to join a cult. She then asked if I could just pick up more shifts at work to cover her other expenses and used the phrase "be a man," which I found more than a little insulting. I then asked her if she would be willing to go back to splitting the chores and such, which is when she began to catch on that the two were related. She yelled at me that I was being a manipulative for doing this and even claimed it was financial award. I stood strong for a while, but now I'm questioning my method because even I feel what I did was a bit underhanded. So, I love her with everything I got. She's an excellent mother and, honestly, before she met this friend, we were both blissfully happy, to the best of my knowledge. Edit. She had always wanted to be a stay-at-home mom before we got together. I try not to say this part because, while her two boys are not mine biologically, they are my sons. But being a single mother was incredibly taxing for her because working in the public was too much. I had a bit of experience with being a single father myself. I have a son of my own, but I was looking to advance my career and was more than happy to take over the bills for a lesson-loaded home. Oh God, I can tell you, but it may be a bit mundane. When we first got married, she would give me shoulder and back massages every day after work and have my favorite music playing when I opened the door, even though she hates bluegrass. She would make my coffee while I was getting dressed. She made sure to pick up extra crunchy peanut butter from the store, even though I'm the only person who likes it. We would have movie night twice a week with the kids and a date night to ourselves once a week. I have always had trouble sleeping and I don't want to take pills for it, so she always had the bed ready for me. A heating pad already turned on and my pajamas on the bed. She would run her fingers through my hair until I fell asleep and would wake me up herself instead of the alarm because she knew it put me in a better mood. None of which I asked for. She's a good wife and wanted to because she knew that that's what I liked. And she did it. She hasn't done a 180. Some of this is still true AF, at least it was until I cut down my hours. That was really when she stopped doing anything at all. And right now she's pissed, so I'm on the couch awake and regretful. Personally, I think she's stubborn. I don't think she even really wants it. She just wants to prove that I would do it if she asks. She has a troubled history with men, and that's why I tend to be forgiving when things do happen. Update 1. My wife overdosed. I have never been in a situation like this. I am a former addict myself, but I didn't have children then. How the hell do I bring this up to them without them being judgmental or hateful to their mother, or worse, falling into the same mental space I am in? I don't want to lie to them, which is what my wife wants, but I am failing to see an alternative that won't destroy them or the respect they have for their mother. I am swimming blind here and I have barely slept since this all came out. Any and all advice is appreciated. Thank you in advance. I think it depends what she was taking. Edit. She was taking Clopin and Adipex that she was buying from her friend. She also admitted to having tried Co and several other prescription narcotics, but those were the only two she did often. This was the friend that turned her on to radical Mandry, though it's come to light that it wasn't Miss Sandry she was being taught, but flagrant drug usage. I have told her that she goes no contact with this friend or else she will be facing divorce along with everything else. The kids are 9, 12, and 14. Update 2. See my profile for details, but I was driving my wife to the rehabilitation center we decided on. On the way, she was screaming at me about how she can't believe I'm humiliating her like this, explaining what was happening to the boys and making her message her dealer/friend that they would not be hanging out or using together anymore, about how she doesn't want to go and that I am a controlling monster, and how threatening her with divorce and taking primary custody of the boys was too far and I was insane. And I just took it and took it and took it until I just couldn't, and I screamed at her. I screamed that the woman I met would have rather died than had a pillhead junkie around her sons and how she disgusted me and that I don't know if she knew how much I was considering leaving her. Not because of the addiction, but the way she was acting like she hadn't brought drugs into our home around me, a former addict myself, and around our boys, that I am beginning to hate her for doing that. That she was becoming exactly what she always cried about her mother being, and that she was lucky I was here to see it before what happened to her goddamn sons. It makes me sick to say, but watching it sink in and just how far she had spiraled felt good. Watching her realize that her actions have consequences was nice. She yelled a few more times that I was abusive or whatever, but she was still crying, so I felt her heart wasn't in it. I plan on speaking to a lawyer. I don't want to divorce her, but I don't know how healthy our relationship could possibly be after this. I know yelling like that was wrong, but I don't feel bad, and that is the part that makes me think that maybe I shouldn't be married to her anymore, for her sake and my own. I don't know what else to do, and I'm so pissed that she detonated C4 in every bit of our life. Update 3. Before you read, please know this is event post. I normally would never be like this, but I am beyond okay and need to get this poison out of my head before I go anywhere else with it. She was cheating. The drug-dealing friend sent me videos of her dancing and grinding on this ugly, hick-looking bastard. I am goddamn destroyed. The boys are staying with my mother for a few days, and I'm taking the next week off work. I am so done. I have never been so angry in my goddamn life. She was so damn smug sending it, in case you don't realize you're replaceable to her. Well, the free ride stops here. I hope she can get on Medicaid for her Suboxone LMFAO. I'm done. I saved the video immediately and I'm going to see a lawyer ASAP. I can't tell anyone yet because I want to do this right. Thankful to my parents for insisted on a prenup with what I, at the time, thought was an inhumane cheating clause. Never been cheated on before, and I feel like tearing my goddamn hair out. I genuinely never thought she would turn out to be such a scummy piece of shit. I cannot handle this. I am not physically able to handle this. I haven't been able to keep food down, and I drank for the first time in over a decade last night. Then I woke up and had to pour the rest down the drain because I am about to spiral, and my boys don't need both mom and dad in rehab right now. I am so close to losing my goddamn mind. Also, believe what you want, but stop sending me private messages about how I should take down the posts or that posting about my personal relationship with my wife is wrong. Please leave me be. It will not work. This is the only place I can talk about this. 2 of my 3 sons are stepsons, but I adopted them. They never had a father due to their biodad being an absolute piece of garbage. My biological son is the youngest and was born to a girlfriend who is not in the picture and doesn't want to be. My sons are 9, 12, and 14. She had 2 jobs when I met her, though they were both bad jobs, and I had been looking into finding her a better one. When it comes to the dealer, she was getting the drugs from her friend, who was a woman, and a few of the men who she cheated with. Update 4. You can read my other posts for more context on what happened to get here if you like. But the short of it is I was blind to my wife's addiction until she admitted it and went to rehab. While she was in rehab, I was sent evidence that she had been cheating often and with more than one person. I've been working on filing for divorce while she's in rehab, not just for the cheating, but because with that on top of everything else, and myself nearly sinking back into my own addiction due to the stress of the situation, I couldn't stand to even think of her anymore, and there's no healthy relationship that has room for that mindset. I honestly didn't want to be in a room with her again to try mediation or counseling due to the fact that the last time I was alone with her, I raised my voice, and at the time even felt she deserved it. I, of course, now know that me doing it was terrible and could be considered abuse. Yet another reason I should not be in a relationship with this woman. I moved all of her belongings to our guest room, minus the pills I found hidden in her bedside table. I took pictures of those in their hiding spot, then flushed them. I also removed her from my bank account and credit cards. I spoke to my boys, explaining the situation without demonizing their mother to the best of my ability, and they seemed to understand. I have no intention of abandoning them, and blood or not, they were my sons. Then she came home. The boys were, and still are, away at camp, a birthday present paid for by my mother. She was quiet, eyes on the ground. After the moment I picked her up at the facility all the way home. Once we got home, I led her to the guest room silently, and she didn't take it well, crying before she could even take the first step. Throughout the next couple weeks, I let her get settled, and though I stayed carefully neutral, I know she could tell something was coming, but I wanted to be as fair as possible and try to let her get used to being out before I said anything, as that was one thing I myself hated about when I left rehab. Everything was flying at me so fast I didn't have time to breathe. Finally, I asked her to sit on the couch, and I began explaining to her that I do not believe I can continue being married to her and that I want a divorce. I should have known her reaction was all wrong. She didn't say anything at all. She only nodded and cried quietly as I spoke. I explained that I did not intend to hurt her, but I could not be married to her anymore, and that maybe both of us should focus on being the best parents we can be. I told her I had no intentions of kicking her out and that because of our prenup, the divorce should be cut and dry, and she should be safe to begin looking for employment now, and once she has a job, I will help her find an apartment. At this, she stood and walked to her room. I let her because I thought she must have been overwhelmed, and this talk could wait. She didn't come out at dinner time, and I weighed whether I should leave her alone or not. Eventually, I decided to knock on the door and ask if she was hungry. Long story short, she had smuggled pills into my house somehow, or she had a stash I was unaware of, and had an overdose and was dead for several minutes in the ambulance, and she's in a medically induced coma because the doctors aren't sure exactly how much damage she's done to her brain from what they've said. I feel like an absolute monster, like I am the scum of the earth, like I should have just said nothing, like I should have just dealt with it, just held it in and stayed. I am responsible for this, and it kills me. I may not have the same love for her as I did, but I do feel so very sorry for everything she's been through. It's killing me. I haven't told my sons yet, and I am debating waiting until they're back from camp so they can have a little more time without this on their minds on top of everything else. I am sorry for the grammar and such. I don't have the energy to edit this, but wanted to get this off my chest. Where's her family? Not my story to tell, but she doesn't have much family alive, and the ones who are, she's no contact with. She has other friends, but I don't know which ones were enabling. They all know what's going on. I messaged all her friends except the dealer, but she knows now. I know from messages she sent me. She hasn't shown up to the hospital, though possibly because she thinks I would throw her out, which I would be tempted to do, to be entirely honest. A couple of her other friends visit all the time. Yes, she's no contact with her mother, ironically because of her mother's addiction and bad treatment of her. The rest constantly insisted she should see her mother, and 2 times even took her boys to her mother's house without her permission. Why he did it at that point, I wanted to do it while she's in rehab, but my therapist told me to reconsider, so I did. I was so angry when I found out about the cheating. I wanted to take her belongings to her dealer's house and leave them there, but I knew that was wrong. I knew that once my anger wore off, I would regret it. So now all I want is to get the divorce started and over with as soon as possible so that I can begin trying to pick up the pieces and move on with my life. On top of that, I didn't want to lead her on, and I could tell that she knew something was coming because I can't even stand her touching me anymore. It makes me physically ill. If I had known she was going to kill herself, I could have closed my eyes and grit my teeth and let her do whatever. But honestly, even now, after what she did, I know that isn't feasible for me. I still found myself wanting to start fights, to yell, and I know that I am not a strong enough person to be in a relationship with someone who hurt me that much, who disrespected me, my home, and my children that much, who took my own past experiences with drugs into account so little that she brought them into my home directly under the nose of myself and my children. Pun intended. This is as much kindness as I can afford to extend to her anymore, for my own mental health's sake. Edit. Not awake yet. I took the advice of some of the commenters and went to go get my boys to see if they wanted to see their mother. I explained the situation to the best of my ability, age appropriate, and asked if they wanted to see her. They all agreed to see her eventually, but the eldest only wanted to go to support his brothers. I'm concerned about the anger he is building towards his mother, and I do intend to talk to him about it, but I also don't want to tell him how to feel or tell him that his feelings are bad and wrong. I was already working to get them into therapy, but I'm going to expedite that. There have been multiple pictures/videos of her dancing on/being inappropriate with men since that post. I haven't blocked the friend because she sent me a large amount of proof of infidelity for the divorce. And in that post, the hick she was dancing on was a man. Perhaps you are confused because her woman friend sent the video. Perhaps my wording was bad. I apologize. And yes, I do know that trauma is the gateway to addiction, as I am an addict in my own right. CSA from my uncle and general abuse from both my parents. We went to counseling during my rehab, and our relationship is much better now, but growing up was very bad. I can't say I know what made her start using, but I can say I know she had a rough childhood and even worse teen years. Editing to add regarding sexual identity. If I found out my wife was engaging in sexual acts with women, I would also consider it cheating. She was doing other sexually inappropriate things, but no, I didn't get any straight-up sex tapes. I would rather not go into it further, but I think you can get my drift. Final update. My wife is dead. I haven't updated in a while, and I'm sorry, but I'm sure you can guess why. I wasn't feeling up to it. I know that everyone said that she was manipulating me or trying to make me stay with her, but honestly, even if that was the case, it didn't matter because the moment she woke up, we both started crying and talking, and we didn't stop for days. She went back into rehab for a little while, came out, and we did couples and solo therapy for both of us. She seemed happy. She seemed better, and I had hoped that the crazy was over, that we would just be happy again. I didn't update then because, frankly, I was scared how everyone would react. I don't do well at getting yelled at. She promised me that if anything happened, if there was anything she needed to talk to me about, she wouldn't hesitate. Everything was going well, and now when I ask myself if there were signs she would go back or that she never stopped, the answer is no. Nothing, except the fact that she had an overdose at her friend's house while I was working and died on her couch. The friend didn't even want to call an ambulance. Her boyfriend had to convince her to. I don't think either of them were arrested that day, but I know from the paper she was picked up a couple of months ago for selling. Everyone kept telling me to go to the police, and frankly, maybe I should have, but frankly, with the way the police act, it wouldn't do much good. Since then, I've been drifting terribly. I took up smoking again, something I quit before I got married because she hated the smell. I hate it now too. The smell, but the hand to mouth is nice. My sons are in therapy and are taking the loss as well as they could be expected to. The younger two talk about her a lot, but the eldest is mostly angry. I'm thankful he doesn't seem to want to say things to his brothers about it, but I always let him tell me anything he's thinking, even when it breaks my heart. I know that maybe everyone here has an idea of who my wife was, but one thing that you could never deny was how much she loved our boys. They were her pride and joy, absolutely everything to her. I miss her. I miss her so much. Feels like a death rattle to breathe. There's never music when I get home anymore, and I hate it. I hate the quiet so much that some days before I go inside, I sit in the car and just cry because I know she won't be there. I haven't even been able to clean out her side of the bathroom yet. It hurts too much to think about getting rid of her perfume or her toothbrush. I haven't felt like writing for obvious reasons, but there's something that feels important now, so I will. Valentine's Day is tomorrow. On the way home from work recently, I caught myself calculating flower prices before I remember that I have no one to give them to unless I put them on her grave. I remember being pissed off at how expensive roses were getting, and now that seems so silly. I just wanted to say, if you have someone you love, please cherish them. Do something extra nice for the person you love tomorrow, for my sake. Nothing crazy, but maybe you can dance around the living room to your song or read to each other something soft or good to let them know you're real and really there. I know that's so cliché and corny, and if Alex were here now, she would actively bully me, but sadly, the old bastards were always right. Life is short. I know I should quit smoking. I don't do it in the house because the smell really does make me sick after a while. I only really do it at night or in the early mornings. I'm considering getting one of those flavored air ones that are going around with no smoke or whatever, so I can keep the hand-to-mouth thing, which I like a lot and missed. Not the best compromise, but it's something. One last thing. Not defending her is so hard for me, but that was the first thing my therapist told me when I asked about my sons. That defending her to them wasn't going to help, and that all I could do was let them talk. My eldest is the only one who really rages about it, but the younger two will eventually, I'm sure. I am also angry in this helpless kind of way that hurts so bad I can't stand to think about it, because if she had just talked to me, I could have helped her, and she would still be here. I am a former addict myself, and I know I made so many mistakes with my wife, but I swear it was like everything was so good again. We slept in the same bed again and had dates. Everything in my mind just wants to scream and beg to know why she would do this, and I can't. I hate it so much because I tried so very hard not to love her anymore when she was alive, and it didn't work. Then I don't see myself doing any better now that she's gone. And it hurts even worse because when other people are mad or say negative things, I still want to defend her, to explain every little reason she had and why it wasn't all her fault. But in the end, it doesn't even matter if I do because she is gone. She won't be here to reap the benefits of that defense or even to care that I changed minds. She won't be here to be respected or disrespected. Feels pointless, but I still want to, and it makes me feel like shit. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.